Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shyam Krishna, a partner with Bain, and it's quite my privilege to be here with this illustrious set of panelists. So just before we kind of head to the panelists, a few things to get all of us on the same page. Very exciting topic about the next billion users, and as we speak, there are about 450 million of them who have access to internet today. And some of the work that we have done, when we look at it over the next decade, we're talking about another 600 million getting added. And this additional new users that we're talking about are quite different from what we're used to currently. So what we essentially saw was almost 9 in 10 of the new users are going to be speaking in their vernacular language and are going to demand solutions in their vernacular language. 3 out of 5 new users are going to be from rural India versus the current that we are used to. So very different set of users that we're talking about. And today, to kind of focus the conversation much more, we are focusing specifically on the agri sector and how there's a lot that can be done for that specific sector. And there's all 4 of them have great examples of how they've done. Now, if you look at the agri sector, we know very well about how important it is for India, whether it's a contribution to GDP, whether, the amount of rural households, I think it's about 2/3 of them dependent on agriculture. But given all this importance, we know what all the challenges have been. So one is, whether it's access to credit. And so I've seen your website where you talk about this, the informal sector, when they go asking for credit, you get almost at interest rates of about 50% or so. So, really cutthroat in terms of, when they want access to credit. A lot of inefficiencies in the system that we are talking about. And it'd be great to hear more from Stellabs in the dairy sector specifically in terms of how they've addressed some of those inefficiencies. Because despite all the hard work, there's no profits or no money that they're essentially making. Similarly, if you look at in terms of how do you get the ecosystem together, and Jai Kisan is a classic example. How do you think about farmers, vendors, buyers, financial institutions, get them together and form a closed loop so that it's self-sustaining in that sense. And after all this, how do you market the products better? And that's what NowFloats comes in to enable businesses go digital very easily. So, exciting set of topics and all 4 of them attempting to solve that, which is the crux of, what is going to determine how big this next opportunity is going to be. So just to start off, for each of you, what will be very interesting to hear is, where did this idea come through? What was the genesis of the idea saying the next billion is an exciting opportunity? And do you see this scaling up to $1 billion opportunity?
Hi, this is Sucharita of Kaleidofin. So I think, just to put things in perspective, the top 3 percentile as far as India is concerned, stops at about, 6 lakhs of income. So really, when you're talking about anybody under 6 lakhs annual income, you're talking about 97% of the country. And that's a big number. Our target market is, we think, about 150 million households, about 750 million customers. That in itself, if you're able to crack the problem, is definitely not just $1 billion opportunity, but likely a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. And what are the problems that this customer is facing? Customers facing today, no access to financial services, no access to advice. So our customers typically save in chit funds, gold, illiquid land, and honestly, this is what is available. Some of these choices are the smartest choices that they could be making, given what's available. But we want to bring the power of, formal finance, customized finance to these customers and provide them personalized financial solutions that really for their real-life goals. So we want to solve the problem of access. We want to solve the problem of good product design, which goes inside the financial solutions, and as well as scale by partnering with many, many customer networks. So we've partnered with about 16 large institutions which provide us a network of almost 5 million customers across 7 states. So that's the kind of opportunity there is. It's still, we are still a young company, but I think there's a lot out there.
Thank you, Shyam. Good afternoon, everyone. So what we do towards this billion-dollar opportunity is to see if we can digitize the dairy sector. So when we started, the idea was to apply Internet of Things, IoT, to a very compelling space. So we looked at telemedicine, we looked at telematics and all that, but found that agriculture is really compelling. By its, vis-a-vis using our IoT platform that we built out, let's say vis-a-vis trying to switch on and switch off your air conditioner in this room or your some stuff inside your car, we thought that it's pretty compelling to apply this sensors and IoT and analytics to a more rural scenario where the only way to collect data is through IoT. There's no other way you could collect data. So the first step we looked at is it a compelling problem, and we found that rural is really compelling from a problem solving point of view. And then we looked at does it scale? Obviously, we need to solve a problem that's not too niche. Then we figured that just in India there's about 300 million cattle, right? And then there are about 76 million dairy farming families. And also what we do can be extended to other non-dairy scenarios. For example, just livestock. There are about 4.2 billion livestock on the planet. So one of the things that we do towards this digitization initiative is sort of a wearable for animals, like a Fitbit for cows that goes around the leg. We can assess, get a 360-degree assessment of that livestock, right? So we're sort of doing a connected cattle kind of a scenario. But that's the first step, right? So we call ourselves as udder to cup digitization company. We used to call ourselves as farm to fork digitization, but then someone asked us, how do you drink milk with a fork? So we said, okay, udder to cup digitization. So everything starts at the udder, right? So 300 million cattle, 4.2 billion ruminants. How do I get my wearable device or the connected cattle component to all of them? Hugely scalable. And then in terms of taking this across the supply chain, don't take a siloed view of farm is everything, because milk has to start from the udder and reach your cup. You need to be assured that the cup of tea, coffee that you're drinking, or the kids that you're feeding, it's a safe milk, right? So giving you a notion of traceability, ensuring that we can give you a vouching saying that this milk is Stellap's gold label milk and it's safe for your kids to drink. You'll be surprised and shocked if I get into details of what milk actually contains, but the idea is, can we ensure that from a traceability point of view, you have safe milk? So one part of what we do is building this digital highway across all these billions of cattle and ruminants and the stakeholders, and then enable this hook that we have built into each one of these villages to provide additional services, giving them lending, investments, insurance, all of what Sucharita just mentioned. So we're trying to partner with companies like these, the financial services companies, insurance brokers, to see if the digital highway that we have built for digitizing the udder to cup, can it be also used to provide additional add-on services. So as a combination, it can scale vertically, and as you just saw in the video, we've just tried to replicate this in other countries like Europe, where the same problem exists. It's an old-fashioned industry no matter where you go. The extent of digitization has been limited to very large farms. So we're seeing if this blueprint can be extended to small farms in Europe, for example, where there are about 250,000 small farms there too. But the size of the small farms are much bigger than the small farms out here. So sort of humongously scalable. What we make in India can be replicated in Europe across livestock and across multiple stakeholders. That's roughly how we think the next billion users can be enabled.
How can you beat someone who says, I've Fitbit for cows? And like finding a nice, cool thing to say like that. My name is Jasminder, and I'm founder CEO of Now Floats. We've been in business 6 years and squarely focused on small businesses, and including micro small businesses. From a market size perspective, 63 million small businesses just in India. We are the second largest country in the world now with the number of smartphones, the number of internet users, and the number of small businesses. And when we started Now Floats in 2012, there were 48 million small businesses, which means a very rough hypothesis that the 15 odd million small businesses that we have seen being born in front of our eyes in the last 6 years, it's somewhat safe to say that they're all born with a smartphone in their mouth or in their hand. So certainly 15 million of the last 5 odd years are clearly people, small businesses born with an internet and a smartphone. And that changes demographics a lot for the country because 63 million is a huge number that includes your, the vada pav wala all the way to a 100 crore company. So it's a large gamut of small businesses in the country. What Now Floats does is help small businesses get an online identity and enable them to be found online and do local commerce. And of course, we do it in a very simple way. You download the app, 2 minutes you get a website, and third minute you put in your, you put a shopping cart. The fourth minute you probably, if you're a doctor or a hotel, you put a booking engine and so on and so forth. And it's all managed through one app. And the interesting part of this app is not only it's instant, you build a business website instantly, but more importantly, you now, do all the possible updates to this website as simply as you do it on a WhatsApp group. So that's been a very key thing in our technology, that you can update your website as often as you WhatsApp, and it's as simple as that. So that's worked for us. How we fell onto the idea, I think, the numbers were big, and we realized there was nobody. I mean, we all know the country's, macroeconomics. With 63 million small businesses, only 800,000 people, 800,000 businesses have any sort of online identity, have any sort of selling on Amazon, have any sort of a website, are on either Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. I mean, that's still less than 1 million of the 63. And so that's where we are focused on. We have about 40,000 paying customers. We don't take a small amount of money. We take, from these customers, we take a minimum of 30,000 rupees upfront, which is a SaaS revenue that we take. And that's interesting because, 60% of our business doesn't come from metros. It comes from tier 2 and tier 3 India. We have 46 offices in this country. So if you want to go to a Rajkot or a Salem or a Trichur, we probably have an office there. And so we are really in the last mile of small businesses and trying to go first into these cities where, perhaps a Swiggy or an Ola or an Uber or a Oyo is not going to come because of the scale, right? That it's not that scalable for them to go open a Rajkot office or Rajkot center. And that's where we are in. So we are trying to bring all the small businesses in India online, and luckily in a very profitable manner.
Hi, I'm Arjun from Jai Kisan. So the genesis, I'm going to answer this question in a two-part question, right? Where was the genesis of the idea, and do we see this as a billion or a multi-billion-dollar opportunity? So the genesis of this idea was when Angela and I were back in our previous jobs, and we were kind of working with a bunch of fintech firms, right? And across fintech lending, we saw this trend line that most of these firms were focusing on homogeneous customer bases. And they tried to attack or solve the problem of the largest homogeneous customer base you could possibly find. So we saw lending fintech firms focus on students, on teachers, on MSMEs, on blue-collar workers, etc. And because we were so passionate about rural parts of emerging markets, there are about 2.5 billion people across the world who focus on agriculture as their primary source of livelihood. And that is when we kind of figured out that there was no fintech platform that was exclusively focused towards catering to this population. And that was our aha moment, and that is when we dived on to Jai Kisan. In addition to which, we also realized that the farmer was the only business entity in the world that bought at retail prices and sold his final produce at wholesale prices. A fundamental equation that made no sense, right? So he brought his raw materials at retail prices from retailers while he sold his final product or produce, the tomato or the grapes or whatever he was growing, to the bottom person in the supply chain. And hence that equation just didn't make sense to us. And if we wanted to reverse it, we had to start with the first thing in any value chain, namely capital, coupled with the raw material which the stakeholder, namely the farmer, was using. Now, getting on to the second part of the question, which was, do we see this as a billion or a multi-billion-dollar opportunity? I'm going to answer this in two ways because we are at the intersection of financing and the product itself as well. So on the financing side, if you see India alone as of end of September, as of end of 2016, the outstanding agri loans were 170 billion US dollars, which is about 12 to 13 lakh crores, right? And that is all being consumed by the next billion users, as we are calling them on this stage, okay? So that's on the financing side. Now, if you look on the equipment and the agri equipment, dairy equipment, poultry equipment that we do go out and finance, that industry in itself on the agri side is anywhere from $7 to $8 billion. And on the dairy, solar, and more innovative equipment is about $10 to $11 billion. And over the past decade, you've already seen companies, even on the traditional side, like Jain Irrigation, et cetera, right, coming up with a billion-dollar market cap, right, growing 20% year on year, which just shows that the opportunity is there. We just need to find out innovative ways to be able to access that in a sustainable manner, though. Because what we see in rural India is, yes, people get in, they dive in, they access the opportunity, but then it's not sustainable for either themselves or all the stakeholders, which is something we are really trying to keep in mind and drive our force with as well.
Fascinating stories. I'll double click into some of these things that we just spoke about. The part Jasminder didn't talk to us about was digitaldesh.in. I don't know how many of you have accessed that website. If you haven't, I would strongly recommend that you should go to that and see. It's really the stories of the next billion users. How do they behave? What do they do? What is their digital behavior to understand that? And it's a fascinating journey, the way you do it. We were just talking about it. I read the recent edition and the story of Nanduji, the house cleaner. And what is fascinating is about how she has a feature phone, and she uses emojis in a very interesting way. Basically, because she's illiterate, she cannot understand what the names are. And so she would write the name of the person, but have an emoji. And the emoji was a way she would recognize who the person is, right? So I'm sure the founder of the emoji never thought about that use case, but it's fascinating. Can you tell us more of these? I mean, in terms of what you have seen as very different behaviors or very different needs that these consumers have that we should be aware of?
Sure, we almost fell into digital days because we were trying to really understand the SMB behavior in Middle India. I'm very fond of saying this, that the Indian ecosystem is so diverse, but unfortunately we straight away go from Kaf Parade to Gurdaspur. So the Middle India is extremely large and multi-trillion dollar, if nothing less, right? So there's huge amount of business to be done in the tier 2, tier 3 cities of India. So when we fell upon, we took it on ourselves to start understanding these people in, and I use the word Rajkot as a metaphor. What do people, small businesses in Rajkot want? I mean, they're not rural. They're certainly not Kaf Parade. So which means they're somewhere there. So, Rajkot, Salem, you get the point. Go to these cities. And this example is very interesting because as we were writing our app, and we keep, obviously are trying to look at how the app is going to work in smaller cities, we fell upon so many of these stories which, put us, go back to my product management and start thinking very deeply on, hey, what's happening here? And, do these guys want a Hindi interface? Do we want an English interface, the Tamil interface? But this story that you bring up is so interesting because, even in our own app and even still, there are some words that we use which doesn't have resonance to large India. It doesn't. We're still very, St. Regis product management organization, right? I mean, you still need to throw your people into Rajkot for 2 days to understand what do people want. And, great example. And in this particular case, two things came out to us. One was surprisingly that, the visual interface is probably going to be the next one before vernacular takes over for us. For us, it's English, visual, vernacular, because visuals are easy to understand. So we'll tread on that because that gave us that feedback. And the second thing I think it gives to us is that, our notions that small businesses in small cities and next billion users are, very need-oriented. I want to break that notion straight away if that's possible. It's amazing how larger India, the next billion users, and I stay Rajkot again and all the way to Gurdaspur or, a small village, everybody is not driven by need. It's my personal experience. They're not driven by need. They're driven by aspiration. Large difference in all of us in our way, in the way we've thought about, hey, that poor guy, he probably needs to make money first, yaar. वो कहाँ उसको smartphone दोगे यार? बेचारा वो तो अभी अभी तो फीचर फोन भी नहीं है उसके पास, इंटरनेट भी नहीं है, क्या करेगा बेचारा? No, 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 they're all above it. You know, you go sell them something which works for them, they don't want it. Everybody is aspirational in this country. And then that's an amazing feedback that we took for the next billion users, saying, don't focus on need, focus on where that person wants to go, and you will get it deployed very fast. So some examples like that, which you know, encourage us to think a little differently, because we all think very sophisticated. So you got to come to the level of, and that's what India is. It's extremely diverse. You know, this example might work in some states, might not work in the other state. So that's what you have to keep watching out for.
Great story. And I'll move to you, Charita, which is, you know, again, your target consumer is very different. I'm sure there are a lot of, especially, you know, when I look at what you've done over the years, there's a lot of unlearning required to actually, you know, target them, to make sure that, you know, yes, they're aspirational, but what their needs are and how do you make sure that you address them. Can you talk to us a little bit about the innovations you have done or you've seen in terms of reaching them effectively?
Yeah. So, you know, the first big innovation which we focused on was to move from a product manufacturer frame to a customer-centric frame. So from products to solutions. And you're right, there was a lot of unlearning to do, because, you know, we've tried sort of selling credit products, going again with a life insurance product, personal accident insurance product, then some term loan. And the customer just gets confused with all these labels and they have no idea why is it that you're offering all of these products and what problem does it solve for them. Imagine if you were to go to a car showroom and people actually asked you to choose the tires and the steering wheels, and, you know, that would be really annoying, right? That's exactly what finance is like for most customers today. Anybody who doesn't have a good wealth manager, stressing on good, really has to go through that experience. And the next billion user typically has the worst experience. So what we're trying to do is saying, let's put the customer first. Let's look at their goals. So a typical customer wants to save up for her daughter's college education, you know, and what she wants to buy is essentially a piece of her daughter's education. She's not interested in figuring out, you know, really what products does she need, etc. Of course, she wants good advice. She wants to make the goal happen. She's very interested in that, and that's where we come in. So there are 2-3 big gaps. One is the gap in good advice to this customer. It's not there. What we are doing is we are making that available at a fraction of the cost of wealth management. Not even, I mean, it's not even comparable. Honestly, our customers pay us approximately 20 rupees plus for advice per month. There is no personalized wealth management service that that is available at that cost. So technology, a lot of data about the customer, you know, using data science helps us really achieve that. The second thing is, how do we actually reach the customer? And our business model in itself is a little bit of an innovation, because what we thought was that if there are today, the way finance works is that you put up dedicated networks. Insurance companies have their own agents, banks have their own staff, mutual funds have their offices, and everybody is going and targeting the same customer. Now, this customer has one goal, has one life, but lots and lots of people are coming to this customer. So in some sense, you know, what we wanted to do was really build a platform, use existing customer networks, you know, such as yours, and really reach out to masses of customers, not one customer at a time, not build our own network. Actually, two NGOs, microfinance institutions, for example, cover. Yeah, so microfinance institutions itself cover about 50 million households in this country today. So there are vast customer networks that are out there that can be tapped into, and the platform way of reaching out to these customers provides that scale, provides
the cost efficiencies as well. And in some sense, the technology to be able to deliver and execute when the customer says, yes, okay, I really want to save up for that 5 lakhs that I need 7 years from now. You have to be able to actually execute, let's say, 5 to 6 financial products at the back end in a low, bandwidth environment instantaneously without reconciliation, and of course have the smarts to be able to keep doing the right thing. So I think that even just the technology itself has been a big journey for us. We have had to look at the needs of not just our end customer but also the agent who is helping the customer, because the more comfortable that agent is, the more successful he will be. So those are the few innovations we've seen, but the big one really is the move from products to solutions, from the tire to the car.
I just want to add a couple of things. Having spent almost more than a decade in Microsoft and selling enterprise products, the kind of CRM that we sell today to our small business, which is not called the CRM, is probably as sophisticated that I sold for about $500,000 to ICICI Bank. So what I'm trying to say is that the average customer we have doesn't understand CRM. He'll say, भैया जी ये बताइए कि मैं ये 50 लोग जो मेरी साइट पे आए हैं उनको मैं कैंपेन कैसे उनको वापस क्यों लेके आऊँगा? And we have to build a whole ERP/CRM, and we built it, right? We give that out of our solution to him. But I'll be damned if I use that word in front of him. He doesn't know what ERP is, they don't know what CRM is, but we have it all built inside our solution. It's like, you can do the whole thing. But that ability to, keep that jargon away, because he just wants to achieve that little thing. And who's going to tell him in a CRM बेच रहा हूँ? He doesn't understand that, neither is going to get you. But you say, आपके 10 कस्टमर पिछले हफ्ते आए, क्या आप उनको दोबारा एक SMS भेजना चाहते हैं? Yeah, that's what CRM is all about today, right? If you need the next generation of technology, you don't need Salesforce.com, $50,000 per user per month to do this. It's actually from an app. It's like 3 pictures and he's made a CRM, and it's move on. So that's a very important thing. What you're selling has to resonate. All the jargons can be left at our table.
Just to follow up on that, actually, we were having a very interesting discussion with some lenders earlier this week, and to talk about how business strategy is driven by what the consumer or your customer actually understands, and how simplified or in a simplified manner you have to get it out to them. Is that if you think about buying a bike today, right? Like especially in rural India, you will see a big Bajaj board. It will not talk about dual braking. It will not talk about mileage. It will actually talk about 3,000 rupees mein bike aapki, right? Before, we were competing on the technical specifications about how good a product was. Now in rural India and some parts of urban as well, you're competing on how innovative the financial product is and in how a simplified manner can you get it across to your customer. And so that is that is something we are really trying to do very much is get the farmer to be able to pay in easy EMI formats, large pieces of equipment, which he couldn't have understood if we would have explained to him the whole interest rate, the processing fees, and given him 5 different options of 5 different tenure times, etc. So it is about making it as simplified as possible for your end customer, while also understanding as to what is happening in the market and how our products actually being driven or marketed to the end stakeholder, namely the partner.
I think we're running short of time. I'm going to ask one question to you, Ranjit, and then open it up to the group for any last few questions. Ranjit, 10 years from now, what would you call success? I mean, you've already got Fitbit on cows, so it's a high bar now. But 10 years from now, what would you call success?
So this digitization journey is going to be a long shot. We're working on a concept, for example. We're working on a facial recognition for that. So when if the children comes to the insurance product, there's a hardware dependency today where you actually need to tag the animal. You can put another friend something is out of the tag, or you need a normal like that. So they're using ML to see if you can would be the village. The idea
That
the challenges are tough. For example, when you spoke about Bharat, right? In the rural area, just when you spoke about challenges, you cannot recharge a battery. Once you tag an animal, the battery lasts 5 to 6 hours. That's a big difference between the human battery. How do you need to get the new battery technologies that can be adopted for the next billion? You can't use the one that we use before, because you can always recharge animals like so our goal is really to digitize every aspect of livestock on the planet, 4.2 billion out there, and see how sort of lay out the digital highway between the consumer and the livestock. So that sort of journey is definitely on.
Hi, I have a question actually for any one of you or all of you. I'm actually curious. So obviously, there's a large aspect. I think the large trend that I heard was simplification of your product. You talked about aspiration, and that aspiration obviously comes from somewhere, right? It comes from WhatsApp group consuming content. Yeah. So I'm actually curious, how have you guys approached, or have you approached like educating your audiences? Sort of in a pre-sales phase, or are you seeing that they are educating themselves, and how is that working for you guys, and where are you seeing that education coming from?
I'll go first on this one because that's really key to certainly segment I am in. As I said, we take 30,000 rupees paid up front before we get you what we give you, 30,000 rupees. And on the higher side, it gets to 60,000 rupees annual. We take it in one check paid up front, and we have 28% of our 70% renewals are for multi-year. That means I have money in the bank for the next 6 years or 5 years. Which means, where is that coming from? Again, another large aspect of India. Product is great. It's you've done your innovation, your marketing, you've got those, you've done all that. Finally, when you want to take money, a large sum of money from someone, from a business owner, it's going to be value. And the second thing is trust. And one of the things to build trust is education. इस देश में आपने किसी को 10 मिनट कुछ पढ़ा दिया, वो आपको 5 साल के लिए बिजनेस देगा, वो 10 मिनट आपको दे देंगे. So we do it both offline, and we have, from the day we started now Floats in 2012, we were using AI and ML to give personalized, customized auto notification to small businesses on what content they should update, which will get consumers to their website. And that was day one. So call it the new generation of engagement-based products. You don't go after 1 year and say, I'm done for renewals. You're going to lose it. You've got to send that notification every week. You've got to teach every week. And you've got to do it in an ML way. You cannot scale that without doing it automatically. So if you have a business website on us and you're a doctor and there's a malaria breakout in Ludhiana, we are going to encourage you to do a malaria camp automatically. And if you're in South India and you have a sari showroom and it's wedding season, we will start telling you that, hey, because we have data for the whole of Chennai, you've got to start talking about your different sarees on discount for the season. That's very, very good. This is education for us. It's a prompt. The gentleman or the owner or the lady who's looking at that notification is getting educated. They're getting, oh, I never thought of this. Oh, I only sell shoes, but these guys are saying you should talk about juttis. I've never thought of selling juttis, but I am selling juttis. So that's a very large aspect of what we do, is this very personalized, scalable, customized notification that goes to you as a business, saying, oh, I start understanding. So a large part of our business is education.
Not the unenviable job of calling time out on this interesting discussion, but I've heard more reminders already. But let's just continue this discussion because the more interesting panel is also coming through. But maybe